Today we're going to be putting aside our Instapot and we're going to be making yogurt using whole milk that we freeze dried, and we're going to make it on our wood cook stove. So why did we decide to do this today? Well, every year during our pantry challenge, we think about what would we miss if for some reason we couldn't go to the store to replenish our supplies. And something that we have on an almost daily basis is yogurt with our breakfast. And if I couldn't go to the store to buy fresh milk or somewhere local to get some fresh milk, how could I make that yogurt so that we could still have that every day? And one thing that we keep in our pantry is freeze-dried powdered whole milk. So we decided this would be a great time for us to give this a try, see how it comes out, and see how we would stand in that part of our challenge if we weren't able to get to the store. So let's move over to our wood cook stove and get this started. I have my pot on the stove. I have a pint of whole milk that we freeze dried in our freeze dryer. So the first thing I'm going to do is pour in that pint of whole milk, which doesn't want to come out of the jar, so give me a second here. There we go. Get that into the pan. Now we got that in. I'm going to do a 3-to-1 ratio. So I did 1 pint of the freeze-dried whole milk. So now I'm going to do 3 pints of water to that 1 pint, and then I'm going to use my whisk to whisk that all together. So there's 2, and this will be 3. So again, like I said, that's a 3-to-1 ratio. So we have that in, and I'm just going to whisk that together so that we incorporate all that powdered whole milk into our water. Now, if you saw my video where I made yogurt using the Instapot, that's pretty much a set it, forget it, hands-off kind of process. But today, what I wanted to do, kind of in lieu with our pantry challenge, is let's say we didn't have any power and I needed to use powdered milk out of our pantry. I wanted to do this on our wood stove and see how it would come out. So we're going to whisk this, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get our milk up to 180 degrees. We're not going to bring it to a boil, but we're going to get it to 180 degrees, and I'll bring you back as soon as it's at that point. So it's only been about 3 minutes. I'm using my digital thermometer, and it is telling me I'm already at 161 degrees. So it's not going to take long for this to get to the 180. I also just wanted to mention, keep stirring this so that your milk doesn't stick during this process. It's pretty quick. I've bounced up another 3 degrees to 163. And if you don't have powdered milk that's a whole milk, which is, you want whole milk if you're going to make a yogurt, you can do this same process using regular whole milk. So it doesn't have to be a powdered milk. I just wanted to try that for this. And we're going to see how it is. We're up to 165. So almost at our 180. Let me get this finished and I'll be back. So we hit our temperature, we hit 180, and I'm going to get this off the stove, and then I'll meet you over at the table and go over why we brought that up to 180 degrees. So we've taken this off the stove. The reason we brought it up to 180 degrees was to ultra pasteurize it. Now you could use an ultra pasteurized milk, but because we are using as our base just a whole milk, we want to kill any bacteria or anything that might be in that milk so that it's not competing when we add our cultures to it. Now, we couldn't add the cultures prior because we would kill those, of course, as well when we het the milk. But the other thing is we need now to let this cool back down to 110 degrees, because that's going to be the perfect temperature for those cultures to enter this milk, to propagate, and to turn it into our yogurt. So I've got my little digital thermometer. I've got that set so that I can keep an eye on it. When it gets to 110 degrees, we'll be back and I'll show you the next step. Now that our yogurt has cooled down to 110 degrees, what I'm going to do is take some yogurt from one of our previous batches. Now you can take yogurt and you can buy your favorite, like say a Chobani plain Greek yogurt, makes a very good seed. I use about a heaping quarter cup when I do a batch, which for me is about a gallon of milk. And what I'm going to do is put it in a container. I'm going to take and scoop some of the cooled yogurt in with that. And then I'm just going to stir this together. I don't want to put it in and whip it. It just seems to work better if you mix it separately and then pour it in with your yogurt. So I'm going to make sure this is well stirred. Like I said before, I think you can freeze your yogurt starters. If you do, make sure you thaw it before you use it for making your next batch. We are planning on taking some yogurt starter and freeze drying it, and then trying this process with both the freeze-dried powdered milk and a freeze-dried starter. So we'll have to make sure we let everybody know how that comes out. So now I'm just going to pour this in and mix it in, make sure it's well mixed. And then the next step for me is going to be getting this into some jars so that I can store it for its next step. So let me get this into some jars and I'll be right back with you. Now what I'm going to do is put this into some jars, and I'm using jars that I have slightly warmed. You want your jars to be at least room temperature because you don't want to cool this off. Now if I was using my Instapot, I would be using the yogurt button to set how many hours I want it to keep this at about 110 degrees. And that's what the yogurt pot does automatically. So since I'm using my wood cook oven for this, I am going to be putting this into the warmer in the top of the oven. And I'll show you that in a minute. And that keeps at about 110 degrees. So let me finish getting these filled and I'll show you where I'm going to put them. And I'll tell you, if you don't have a wood stove and you're doing this on your regular stove, how you can keep yours at 110 degrees. So I'm going to be using, as I said, the warmer on our wood cook stove. I've got a little thermometer in there. It stays about 110 degrees. And I am going to put the jars. You can see I put just a lid and ring on those. And because I used 3 pints of water, I ended up with 3 pints of yogurt. So we're going to put those in. I'm going to leave those in there for at least 8 hours. I'm going to check on them and see if they're ready. Close this up. Now, you can do this, like I said, on a regular stove, and if you're not using a wood cook oven that has a warmer like I have, you can take your jars, you can put them into a cooler with a heating pad overnight to keep them at about 110 degrees. You can put them in your oven on without the oven itself on, with just the light on in the oven. Leave them in there for about 8 hours or overnight if you're doing this later in the evening, and then check on them in the morning. As long as you keep them at about that 110 degrees for a minimum of 8 hours, they should set up fine. So we're going to leave these. We're going to come back in about 8 hours and check on them and see how they're doing. Well, it's been about 8 hours. It is now 10:30 at night, and I am going to check the yogurts before I go to bed. So let me grab them and let's check and see if they're done. Now the jars are hot, so we'll keep that in mind. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the cover off one of these. Take my gloves off. And I'm gonna see if I put a spoon in, if it just stands up or if it falls over. If it stands up, we know that it's done. It looks done to me. It's standing pretty good. Now the yogurt right now is still kind of hot, so I'm going to let this go into the refrigerator and cool. Let me open another one. I'll check this one. Yep, it's sticking pretty solid here. So what I'm gonna do is get these in the fridge, let them sit in the fridge overnight, and then we'll really give them a good test in the morning and have some for breakfast. Well, when I left you last night at about 10:30, these jars were still very warm, and I put them in the refrigerator for overnight. So it's the next morning, and I wanted to show you some differences with these 3 jars. The 3 jars are all from the same batch, but the jars each settled a little bit differently. So this jar is a little bit thicker than this one, and then this one has quite a bit of weight on top. And I'm going to shine a flashlight at the back, which is going to kind of highlight the differences in the jars. So the first jar is nice and thick. The second jar is a little bit thinner. And this third jar, you can see the whey separated on the top. Now the reason that these are a little bit different in the thickness and why one has a lot more whey than the other 2 may just be the order in which I poured the yogurt mix into the jars. So it could be something that simple. For most people, if you've seen my former video, you know at this point I would normally take this, I would pour it either over some cheesecloth or muslin in a strainer, strain off the excess whey to make a thicker yogurt like a Greek yogurt. Now if you like your yogurt a thinner yogurt, these 2 are probably just fine. This one I would strain the whey off the top, but you can see that there ended up a difference, which I've never had it happen this dramatically before. But that may be just the luck of the draw, which sometimes happens. So the real test is going to be a taste test. So let's scoop some out of this first jar. And it's fairly thick. I prefer a real thick Greek yogurt, but tastes like yogurt. So this came out well. What I'm going to do is I am going to take these 3 jars. I'm going to pour them over some muslin in a strainer, strain the excess whey off to get myself a little bit thicker yogurt. But I'm going to consider this overall a success. And our next step is going to have to be trying to freeze dry a yogurt starter and use a freeze-dried yogurt starter with our freeze-dried whole milk. So we'll have to give that a try, maybe on another video. Until next time, everybody, remember, give us a thumbs up for a like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and until next time, we'll see you.